So it turns out I'm a cheapskate, and the version of this software that I'm using to record myself right now is free, but that means I have a limit on how long I can record all at one time. So that might happen again. This is now Evolution Notes Part 2. So we were talking about convergent evolution. We went over streamlining, and now we're looking at bats and butterflies that are absolutely positively not related. Butterflies are insects, bats are mammals, and they both have adapted wings, the ability for flight, but the wings evolved from different structures. So these are convergent evolution because these two things are not related and they come together in their evolution because of certain environments. Okay, another example for convergent evolution would be coloring or camouflage in a specific environment. So when we're looking at this particular environment, if you can look at these organisms, I'm sure you can guess. It's looking a little Lion King up in here. So this is the savanna, and all of these organisms are actually examples of convergent evolution because in this environment, they're all adapting to be brown and tan and slightly orange, so they can sort of fit in with the natural savanna landscape. So camouflage or coloring can also be a type of convergent evolution. Okay, so the next type of evolution is actually related to convergent evolution. So we're going to say, in this case, divergent evolution. We're going to look at di meaning apart and verge meaning direction again. So if you look at like divide, it means you're like breaking things apart, has the root di. So divergent means the directions actually start in the same place and then diverge apart. They go apart in different directions. So when you're looking at this, you're going to say the starting point is similar or the same, and then things kind of branch off and go in their own direction because they are moving in the direction apart, away from each other. Divergent evolution is officially when organisms do share a common ancestor or history, but two groups show different adaptations based on their own environments. This happens a lot, and this was actually something that Darwin first noticed with his finches. So on Galapagos Islands, there were populations of finches, and Darwin noticed, well, they all kind of seem related, but they all have different adaptations. So let me take a closer look. So they did have a common ancestor, but depending on which island they were located and depending on what the finches ate, they actually were evolving differently. So that's one example is Darwin's finches. It's very classic. I wanted to mention it. I don't have a slide for that specifically. Another example would be butterflies. So depending on where the butterflies are settling or where they decide to take up a habitat, where their food source is, maybe butterflies might adapt differently depending on natural selection in certain habitats. So if you have down at the bottom here, you see this butterfly, and then you kind of look at this. These can represent possible generations of offspring. So this first butterfly might have laid, different eggs, and then the larva turned into these butterflies, and then this butterfly on the right sort of kept having offspring based on natural selection, sort of ended up being orange. And then on the other hand, you have these butterflies that end up being brown and white. They have a common ancestor, but they diverged away from each other. These are two types of wolves. So you have a wolf at the top here that may be found in more North American, even desert environments here. But then you have this Tasmanian wolf, which is Tasmania in the Australian outback. You'll see that you have different adaptations, but they started out to be sort of similar, and then they diverged away from each other. Another very similar example with wolves was also foxes. So foxes are very highly adapted to the environment that you can find them in. So you have a red fox, you have an Arctic fox that's going to be adapted more for snow, and you have fennec fox, which is going to be have very large ears, adapted for very hot weather. So you have these different types of evolutions that have all branched away from each other from a common fox ancestor. Another very classic example is a brown bear and a polar bear. So this brown bear is pretty excited about being a brown bear, and then the polar bear says, "Dude, I used to be a brown bear too, man, but my ancestors decided to live in the Arctic Circle, and due to geographical isolation over the years, we've developed a completely different set of evolutionary adaptations." Yeah, man. So it eventually resulted in us becoming a different species of bear. So a little bit oversimplified there. So, the polar bear ancestors didn't just decide to go live in the Arctic Circle. We don't know what happened there. So sometimes species get separated by accident. Sometimes species get separated by natural disasters, by human development, and then they adapt as a species, or their species eventually becomes extinct. So in this case, you have the brown bears, and maybe a population of them were sort of forced north because of territory or food or resources, and so then you have this adaptation for lighter colored fur, bigger bodies, more fat content on their bodies to keep them warm. So you have these things happening due to natural selection, and this is another example of divergent evolution. So another type of evolution that I know is sort of brushed over by a lot of teachers and a lot of textbooks is artificial selection, and I wanted to dig a little bit deeper into it because we do it all the time as humans. We natural select organism populations, and it's important to know that you are doing it, people are doing it either on purpose or by accident. So the definition is officially when people control how organism populations evolve to give them desirable traits. This could be on purpose or by accident. So some examples are dog breeding. So if you have, somebody does dog shows, they might only want some certain dog traits to be passed on. So you have a show dog, and people pay lots and lots of money to get their hands on one of the offspring from famous show dogs, because then the offspring will also hopefully win the dog shows and have some of those same traits. Another thing is for hunting, for size, for different breeds. Some people can breed animals because they want them to be hypoallergenic, or they want them to have a certain look to them. So this little curly-haired dog right here might have been artificially selected for its hypoallergenic fur because it's not going to shed, or doesn't have the same type of dander as other dogs. So that was an example of artificial evolution. Artificial selection, which is a type of evolution. Another example would be agriculture. So you have corn. This corn used to just actually be this useless sort of grain, like a grass. And then people decided, okay, well, if we maybe put certain crops, we only want to plant seeds from the better types of corn. So they get some of these bigger the bigger corn kernels, and those are the seeds, and then they grow more, and then they're like, oh, look, this is becoming better, this is becoming more of a corn cob, we can eat these grains, so let's just take some of these bigger ones and then plant it again. And then you just keep taking what desirable seeds that you like, that people think are going to yield more crops or yield better crops, and then they just keep planting them. That's artificial selection. Same thing with different types of produce, so peaches, tomatoes, strawberries, things like that. Now we're getting into this, genetically modified organism, GMO thing, where people can not only maybe artificially select them manually, planting the seeds that they want and getting rid of the seeds that they don't want, but now people are sort of genetically engineering food to have certain qualities that are beneficial. So peaches and tomatoes are just generally very soft. So if you have a genetically modified peach or tomato, maybe they can genetically modify for a tougher fruit so that when the fruit is transported, that it doesn't get bruises as easily and it lasts a little bit longer and stuff like that. So when this is accidental, a lot of the accidental artificial selection comes back to using pesticides. So if